G. Jackson. Young. Unbelievably young. The youngest player in the draft, I believe, Tyler?
Yeah, it's either him or Najee, I believe.
He is a forward-ish sort of player. South Carolina, 6'9". The range of this guy in drafts is crazy. Lottery pick for some, second round pick for others. The shooting numbers are like they're disgusting. Like you probably don't want to look at that. 38 from the field, 32 from three, 68 from the line on 31 usage. Like a true shooting 47 on 31 usage is disgusting. Plus we tie in some of the reports of the not even reports, the stuff, the criticizing of coaches on social media during the season, the reports out of the combine of a lack of fitness and conditioning being well down, and none of that paints a great picture. But there is the packages here. The scoring wing is a great sort of archetype of a player, and all the pieces are there. But there's a lot of concerning things about Jackson that have surfaced over the last 12 months or so.
And he's probably the biggest wild card out of this entire draft because, like you mentioned, super young. He should be going into his freshman year fall, but reclassified, went to South Carolina. If he didn't reclassify, he would probably be the preseason number 1 overall pick for next year's draft.
Yep.
That's how talented and athletic and big he is. It's important to note that his situation and that team at South Carolina were really bad. There's no shooting around him. There's no real playmakers around him. But unfortunately, he didn't help any of that in really any form or fashion. The reports out of the combine are really concerning about how he's basically out of shape and kind of bombing workouts and interviews, and how much slower his workout pace is compared to everyone else that teams are interviewing. That's really concerning because he came into the situation this last week with big questions about his maturity and his readiness, and he just kind of exacerbated those. And it was a great opportunity for him to come in phenomenal shape and just really drop jaws left and right. Besides the immaturity issues, which I'm always hesitant to really go in on unless you really know the guy. More concerningly is just how low his feel of the game tends to be. And 6.6 assist rate is absurdly low. 44.4 effective field goal rate. You have on the screen 47.4 true shooting percentage. He ranked in the 98th percentile in isolation frequency, but the 15th percentile in efficiency. Besides spotting up, he didn't have a single off-ball play type frequency that was over 5%. So he was either standing still or dribbling the air out of the ball. 21.4% of his shots came in the mid-range, and only 23.5% of his shots came at the rim in the half court, and he only shot 49% there. Someone that big, that skilled, that athletic should be getting to the rim at will against college defenders, and he just was effusive about settling for these tough mid-range fadeaways, and some of them look great. I buy the shooting long term. The percentages are gross, but I think a lot of that is shot selection. I think he's going to be a good shooter long term, but the decision making and the feel are really, 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 really concerning.
They are. Like you talked about low assist rate, it's a really low steal rate as well. Like he's under
Yeah.
2, I think he's under 1.5 in his steal rate. I just did have that there. He's at 1.4 steal percentage. Like that's really low. Like you want it around 2 usually to be able to have the success. But we say all these negatives. We say that shot selection. We say the feel. We say why all this usage, which I think is part of the South Carolina situation where they're just like do what you want. He is 2 years younger than Brandon Miller, which as both being freshmen, that we talk about maturity, 2 years. That is an insane difference. And we could be coming in here at the start of G. Jackson's 3rd NBA season, and he still could have, he could theoretically have been a freshman in college coming into the draft. So that's a big difference. Like this is a hyper young guy, and I think when you get a guy that's that young, that has those concerns and immaturity, and we all mature at different points and all that sort of stuff. But when I guess maybe correct me if I'm wrong here, Tyler, but the college program enables that a little bit and doesn't really bring him with that sort of structure that I do hold a little bit against him and the maturity and the conditioning, but he doesn't. There's still so much room to improve here for how young he is and how he can develop. And you look at all the numbers, you go, I wouldn't draft this guy ever. Like, what am I doing? Nothing makes sense here. But size, the feel, he can improve, and it's just the youth. Like, he might never become anything, but it's really hard to judge when we're talking about a guy that is just that much younger than literally everybody else that's in this class. And when you want a guy that's going to hit like a 6'9" forward, like with scoring and usage ability, shot creation ability, like it's gold. And that's where it becomes how much do you trust your development and your coaching to get that guy on track? And I think, talk about immaturity. I think there's a thing to be said here also, that he could have gone back to college into a weaker draft class, been a number 1, top 5 pick, and done all that and come in with all that thing. But he said, no, like, I'm going to the NBA now. I'm going to go drafted much lower than what I would next season in what is a weaker draft. And I think there's a level of, not maturity, but someone said maybe he does, sort of, not even outwardly, but craves some of the structure and the discipline that maybe an NBA team can bring him. Maybe that's going a little bit too far, but a lot of players in this situation be like, no, just go back, I'll be a top 5 pick next year, and then people will love me. But he's like, my season wasn't that great, but maybe I just need that extra structure that an NBA's environment provides.
Yeah, and that's definitely the hope. And I really think he's going to be one of these guys where on draft night, depending on who takes him, I could either be like, oh, I should have had him 15 spots higher, or, oh, I should have had him 15 spots lower. And I think the culture that he goes into is going to be so important. What you talked about with him, maybe he's craving that, that ability to be coached hard and that structure around him. So a very similar thing with Anthony Edwards coming out was, these immaturity concerns. And does he love basketball? There's the work ethic there. And then he goes to Minnesota, and Chris Finch and eventually comes in and coaches him incredibly hard and gets the most out of Anthony Edwards. And that's what Anthony Edwards wanted and needed. So I'm really hoping that's the situation with Gigi, because at that size, those skills, he just kind of needs to be steered in the right direction of good basketball habits to develop, and, taking the ball out of his hands and being held accountable. I know he was, in a sense, for after that Instagram post questioning his coaches and teammates and stuff, but the usage was still there. The lack of defense was still there. If he goes to a place and a head coach and a system and a culture that's going to hold him accountable, teach him really good basketball habits, 5 years from now, we could be looking back and being like, I can't believe 10, 15, 20 teams passed on this kid.
Because the other thing is like 5 years ago, you'd say, well, he's going to the NBA for money. But if you go pick 19, like the rookie salary is like, you probably could make more NIL money if he stayed at college. Like that's not that big of a deal. So it's not that he is going because he needs that money, because there is a path for him to make that money pretty easily. Staying as the number 1 returning player in college basketball, he could have done that. Next slide.